March 27, 1977. Two of the largest passenger jets ever built are sitting on the ground at a small airport in the Canary Islands. Between them, 644 people, businessmen, tourists, families heading home. Everyone is alive. In 57 seconds, 583 of them will be dead. And the chain of events that killed them started with a bomb at a completely different airport hours earlier. This is the story of the deadliest aviation accident in history. And if you've heard of it at all, you probably got the watered-down version. Because the real story isn't about bad weather or bad luck. It's about ego, pressure, and a single radio transmission that three different people heard three different ways. To understand why 644 people ended up trapped on a fog-covered runway in Tenerife, you have to start in Las Palmas, the airport they were actually trying to reach. At 1:15 p.m. that afternoon, a bomb exploded in the flower shop at Las Palmas International Airport. It was planted by a Canarian separatist group called MPIAC, a group most people in the world had never heard of and still haven't. They called in a second bomb threat, claiming another device was still inside the terminal. Las Palmas shut down immediately. Every flight inbound to Las Palmas got redirected. Most went to the nearest available airport, Los Rodeos on the island of Tenerife. Los Rodeos was small, a regional airport. It was not built to handle this volume, and within an hour it was overwhelmed. Planes were parked everywhere, on taxiways, on the apron, wherever they fit. The main taxiway was blocked. Aircraft that needed to reach the active runway would have to taxi down the runway itself, a procedure called a back taxi, and turn around at the far end. That detail will matter. Among the diverted aircraft, KLM Flight 4805, a chartered 747 operated by the Dutch national carrier. 248 passengers, most of them Dutch tourists on a cruise package. The captain was Jacob van Zanten, the most senior, most decorated pilot at KLM. His face was literally on the cover of KLM's in-flight magazine that month. Also diverted, Pan Am Flight 1736, 396 passengers, American tourists mostly. Captain Victor Grubbs, experienced, methodical. Both planes sat on the ground at Tenerife for hours, waiting. As the afternoon wore on, the situation at Los Rodeos got worse. Fog was rolling in from the mountains, thick, low, the kind that reduces visibility to near zero in minutes. Captain Van Zanten had a problem that went beyond the weather. KLM operated under strict Dutch crew duty time regulations. His crew had been on duty for hours. If they didn't depart within a specific window, they would legally exceed their allowed hours and be grounded overnight. That meant stranding 248 passengers in Tenerife, rebooking hotels, and enormous cost and embarrassment to KLM. Van Zanten had made a decision earlier that compounded the pressure. While waiting, he'd ordered his plane refueled. Fully. It took 35 minutes. That 35 minutes would prove catastrophic. Because when Las Palmas finally reopened and planes were cleared to leave, the Pan Am jet, which didn't need extra fuel, was ready to go. But it was blocked at the gate by the KLM jet, which was still being topped off. Van Zanten's decision to refuel didn't just delay him, it delayed both planes. By the time both aircraft were ready to move, the fog had dropped visibility to less than 300 meters. You could barely see 1,000 feet down the runway. Los Rodeos didn't have ground radar. Controllers couldn't see the planes. They were working entirely on radio communication and position reports. The plan, both 747s would backtaxi down the single active runway, runway 30. The KLM jet would go first, reach the end, turn 180 degrees, and hold. The Pan Am jet would follow, but exit at taxiway C3 before reaching the end, clearing the runway so KLM could take off. Simple enough. Except for one problem, the taxiway labels at Los Rodeos were ambiguous, and the Pan Am crew wasn't entirely sure which turn was C3. The KLM jet reached the end of the runway, turned around, engines spooling up. The Pan Am jet was still on the runway, still looking for C3. They had passed it, confused by the signage in the fog, and were looking for the next exit. Van Zanten's first officer, Klaas Meurs, contacted the tower. He read back their clearance, a route clearance, not a takeoff clearance, and ended with something that should never have been said. "We are now at takeoff." There are three possible interpretations of that phrase. The tower heard it as, "We are in position at the runway." The Pan Am crew heard it as, "We are beginning our takeoff roll." Van Zanten heard it as confirmation they were cleared to go. The tower responded, "Okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you." The word "okay," standard filler meant nothing, was transmitted simultaneously with a Pan Am transmission saying, "We're still taxiing down the runway." The two signals collided. What KLM heard was a brief squeal of static. Nothing intelligible. Van Zanten released the brakes. The Pan Am crew saw the KLM jet's landing lights appear out of the fog, moving toward them at 160 miles per hour. Captain Grubbs yanked the throttles to full power and turned hard left, trying to get off the runway. He gained maybe 100 feet. Van Zanten saw the Pan Am plane at the last moment and pulled back, trying to rotate early, trying to get airborne before impact. The tail of the KLM jet scraped the runway as he forced it up. He almost made it. The belly of the KLM 747 sheared across the top of the Pan Am jet at 5:06:50 p.m. The KLM plane stalled, fell back to Earth, and exploded. Everyone aboard died instantly. The Pan Am jet was torn open and caught fire. Of 396 aboard, 61 survived, mostly from the front section, which was sheared off and clear of the main fire. 583 dead, in 57 seconds. The official investigation, conducted by the Spanish government, blamed KLM, specifically Van Zanten, for initiating the takeoff roll without explicit clearance. KLM's initial response was to quietly settle with every family. No trial, no public admission. The airline paid out millions, and the Dutch Aviation Authority closed the file. Here's what didn't make the news. The investigators noted that under Dutch aviation culture at the time, Van Zanten's authority was essentially unchallenged in the cockpit. His first officer, Meurs, had actually raised a concern seconds before takeoff, asking whether they had received their ATC clearance. Van Zanten's response was curt. He was already rolling. The phenomenon has a name now: cockpit authority gradient. The idea that a first officer, even knowing something is wrong, won't challenge a captain with Van Zanten's reputation and seniority. Meurs had been trained by Van Zanten. He didn't push. Tenerife didn't just change KLM, it changed all of aviation. The concept of crew resource management, CRM, was developed directly in response to this accident. For the first time, airlines began training crews not just on technical skills, but on communication, authority, and the explicit right, the obligation, of any crew member to challenge a captain's decision. The ambiguous phrase "we are at takeoff" was eliminated from aviation communication worldwide. Today, the only phrase that means a plane is taking off is "call sign is rolling." The passive role of air traffic controllers during low visibility was addressed. Airports above a certain traffic threshold are now required to have ground radar. 583 people died. And because of exactly how they died, in exactly that sequence of miscommunications and unchallenged authority, the global aviation system became meaningfully safer. The procedures we take for granted every time we board a plane were written in that fog. Van Zanten was not a reckless pilot. He was the best KLM had. He made one decision, to refuel, that put him 35 minutes behind. He heard what he needed to hear in an ambiguous radio transmission, and he accelerated down a runway he couldn't see to the end of. Victor Grubbs, the Pan Am captain, survived. He never flew again. He gave interviews for years, trying to make sure people understood what happened. Captain Grubbs said once that the thing that haunted him wasn't the impact. It was the few seconds before, watching those lights come out of the fog, knowing what was happening.